All right. Shalom Aleichem. Thanks for coming. Um, so my idea now is basically I'm starting Rambam's Mishnah Torah and starting with the first book, Sefer Hamada. Sefer Hamada, the Book of Knowledge, which is the first book in the whole series, in the whole set of Mishnah Torah. So slight background. The Mishnah Torah, the Rambam, is his magnum opus. Is the only Hebrew, and essentially, his other works were in Arabic. The Guide to Perplex, the Mer Nevuchim. He had works on the Mishnah. A commentary on the Mishnah. But this magnum opus of his was essentially the first of its kind, really, a compilation of halachas in a specific order. If you look in the Gemara, look in the Talmud, which is how we, learn, the halachas and mitzvahs, and the oral tradition comes down from the Mishnah and then through the Gemara, and then that's in the Talmud. So the idea there was, you look into a Gemara and you'll find things kind of scattered, and obviously everything is organized the way that it's organized, and there's obviously a reason for the order that we find within the Gemara. But in terms of keeping everything organized and set by topic, the Rambam, the Mishnah Torah, was the first. This is the first to do that. So essentially, when the Rambam put this together, he had 14 books. It's called Yad HaChazaka. The Yad HaChazaka means the hand of strength. It's the 14 books of the Mishnah Torah. And so we're starting with Sefer Hamada, which is the book of knowledge. So I thought about just jumping into the beginning of basically the content, but there's an introduction, there's akdamas from Rambam himself that he wrote. So it feels necessary, in the Rambam cycle, in the yearly cycle we do, there's the introduction, the Rambam's own introduction is included in that cycle. So it's scheduled, so it's clearly important, and it's it's not the publisher's forward, it's the Rambam's own introduction. So it feels necessary. I may not do the entire introduction. I'll probably do the things that are sort of content based, and then when it goes into the enumeration of the mitzvahs and it goes into details as to the names of everybody that was involved, we can go back to it. But I think I want to just kind of introduce the Mishnah Torah and then get into chapter 1. So first, it starts out Hakdamas Rambam. It says, "Az loy evesh b'habiti el kol mitzvasecha." So it's what the Rambam does is as a heading for all of his sections in the Mishnah Torah, he gives a pasuk, and the verse is always relevant to kind of the content of what's about to be discussed and everything like that. So with this one, it says, "Az loy evesh," then I will not be embarrassed, "B'habiti akom secha," when I look at your mitzvahs. So this is the pasuk that he gives, and it's from Tehillim. When he goes into it, he says, "Kol hamitzvahs shenitnu loy leMoshe b'Sinai." Because all the mitzvahs that were given to Moshe at Har Sinai, Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu. Sorry, I gotta switch. Can you hear me? Still? Yeah, great.
Yes.
Great, thank you. So Kol HaMitzvah Shenitnu Lo LaMoshe B'Sinai, all the mitzvahs were given to Moshe at Sinai. The Ferushim Nitnu, and the explanations, Shenemar, as it says, Ve'etna Lecha Es Luchais Ha'even Va'Torah Va'Mitzvah. So the pasuk says in Shmos that Hashem says, "I give you the luchais, the tablets that has the 10 Commandments on it, ha'emen v'ha'Torah, and the Torah, v'ha-mitzvah, and the mitzvah, right? So Torah zu Torah shebechsav. So when it says the Torah, this is a mention of the written Torah. When it says v'ha-mitzvah, zu perusha, meaning v'tzivanu la'asos ha-Torah al pi ha-mitzvah. Mitzvah zu hi ha-nikra Torah sheba'al peh. So when Hashem gave us the Torah, and He gave us the Torah Shabbat Peh, meaning the Torah was the written Torah, and then the Torah Shabbat Peh, the oral Torah, is it's usually translated as the oral tradition, and generally tradition means something that was passed on, and it's not inaccurate, but there's more importance on the Torah Shabbat Peh than just to call it tradition. There's a pasuk in Torah where it says, Hashem says, it says, Ksav lecha, write these words down for you, it'll be because of these words that I establish my covenant with you. So in this pasuk, these words, Elu Dvarim, is written twice. So Chazal say that this is a mention of the two Torahs, the written Torah and the oral Torah. So if there's the two Torahs being mentioned in this pasuk, the Torah, when it says Ksav lecha hadvarim ha'eleh, write these words down, clearly that's a reference to the Torah shebechsav, to the written Torah. So the question is then, why is it then the other mention of ha'elu devarim, these words, that's the set of words, meaning the Torah Shabbat Peh, that Hashem says it's because of these words that I establish my covenant with you. Seemingly, it's placing more importance on the Torah Shabbat Peh, or almost like more authority on the Torah Shabbat Peh. If it's write these words for you, for it'll be because of these words that I establish my covenant, that going on the Torah Shabbat Peh, how could we say that when the Torah Shabbat Chsav is the foundation? The explanation is beautiful. It says, and this is really what Rambam is saying here, that many cultures will have access to the Torah Shebechsav, and we will also have our Torah Shebechsav, but it'll be through the Torah Shabbat Peh that it'll be evident who the covenant is with, right? Because it's the Torah Shabbat Peh that allows us to fulfill the mitzvahs, to fulfill these words, the first one, the Ksav Lecha. So when everybody sees what the Torah Shebechsav is and sees the written Torah, sees all the mitzvahs and the laws, when they see who it is that's living them out, that's when it becomes evident who the covenant is through. But more importantly, it's through fulfilling them properly that we are established, that we live up to this covenant, right? So yes, it's the Torah Shebechsav is the foundation, but it's through the Torah Shabbat Peh that we're able to live up to our side of that covenant, right? So this is what he's saying. So the Torah Shebechsav in this pasuk is so the Torah and the mitzvah. So the Torah is obviously the written Torah, and then the mitzvah that goes on the Pirusha, which is the Torah Shabbat Peh. So Kol HaTorah Ksava. Kol HaTorah Ksava, Moshe Rabbeinu Kodim Sheyamus B'Ksav Yadai. So Moshe Rabbeinu himself, he wrote the Torahs down, the entire Torah, right, before he passed away, with his own hand. Yonosan Sefer L'chol Shevet V'Shevet, and then he gave a Sefer Torah to each tribe, right? So he wrote down the entire Torah. Then he wrote down an entire Torah for each tribe that they had. The Sefer Echad Nisano Ba'arim La'ed. And then he had one Torah scroll one Sefer Torah, a Torah scroll that he wrote, that went into the Ark, of the Covenant. La'ed, as a testimony. Shenemar, as it says, La koyach es Sefer HaTorah hazeh v'samtem oisai. Says, take this Torah scroll and put it and place it really in the ark. Mitzvah shehi pirush HaTorah. And when it says that mitzvah, as we said, this is a reference to the explanations on the mitzvah that we're able to fulfill them properly. Lo yichsava. These were not written down. Ela tzivava l'zekeinim v'li Yeshua v'li Shar Kol Yisrael. Rather, they were commanded by Moshe to the elders, right? To the elders, the sages of the time, meaning the elders really is more accurate, and to Yeshua and to all of Yisrael, right? It says that they all would hear these, depending on what category you fell into, you might have heard it repeated, several times. So we see over here that this is how the Torah Sheba al Peh was passed down. The Torah Sheba Chsav, one to each Shevet, one to each tribe, one that went into the Aaron, and then the Torah Sheba al Peh, the oral tradition, he never wrote down, but it was handed down orally down the generations throughout all of Yisrael, throughout the Jewish people. So he says, Shnemar, as it says, L'shar kol Yisrael, to all the Jewish people, and it says Shnemar, as it says, Eis kol hadavar asher anechi mitzaveh eskem oisei, tishmeru la'aseis. It says, be mindful. Really, es kol hadavar asher anechi mitzaveh eskem oisei, tishmeru. So to guard, right, and observe everything that I am giving to you, everything that I am commanding. And so because of this, because he says that, because of this pasuk, we call it the Torah Sheba'al Peh, that he didn't write it, and he was careful to hand it down, and it was passed down orally. Now, it got written, but we're going to get to that. Afapi shalei nichtava Torah Sheba'al Peh Limda Moshe Rabbeinu Kula Beveis Dinai L'Shivim Zikanim. Now, even though the Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral Torah, was never written down, right? Moshe taught the Beis Din, taught his court, right? And his court of the 70 elders. Ve'Elazar u'Pinchas v'Yeshua. And Elazar and Pinchas and Yeshua, right? Elazar and Pinchas were Kohanim, the Kohanim, the relatives of Moshe, but also they were in the inner circle of being taught these things. The Elazar and Pinchas were Yeshua, and Yeshua, we know Yeshua. Shalashtan Kiblu Moshe. They received the oral tradition, the Torah Sheba'al Peh, from Moshe. The Yeshua, Shahu Talmidei, Moshe Rabbeinu, and Yeshua who was the student of Moshe Rabbeinu. Says Mazur Torah Sheba'al Peh v'tzivo aleh was, let's see, Mazur Torah Sheba'al Peh v'tzivo aleh, and he taught, Moshe Rabbeinu taught the oral Torah to Yeshua. Yeshua kol yemei chayav limud al pi zekanim rabim kiblu miYeshua. So, and then all the days of Yeshua's life, throughout his entire life, he in turn limud al pi, he then taught the oral Torah as well, in the same manner as he had received it from Moshe Rabbeinu. And it says zekanim rabim kiblu miYeshua, and then many of the elders received this oral tradition, this oral Torah, from Yeshua himself. And Eli received the same the oral tradition, the Torah Sheba'al Peh, from Pinchas, from the elders and from Pinchas. Okay. Now, Eli receiving the Torah from Pinchas, Eli is the one who was Eli received it from Pinchas, Pinchas received it from Yeshua and from the Zekanim, from the elders. From there, every generation continuously had elders, and there were obviously the Beis Din and the courts of people who had the information. But the Rambam continues by going through the leaders of each one of these generations as it continues to go through and then explain essentially by the leaders, right? So according to the leaders. So it says Shmuel kibu me'eli ubeis dinai. Shmuel Navi received it from Eli. Eli received it from Pinchas. So we see the direct line from Moshe, from Hashem to Moshe, Moshe to the elders and to Yeshua, and then on to Pinchas, Pinchas to Eli, and then from Eli to Shmuel, Shmuel Navi. Shmuel was the prophet who, you know, the whole story with David HaMelech, King David. He's the one that established David HaMelech and, you know, anointed him, and he'll go through that as well. So David kibul Shmuel ubeis dinai, and David received it from Shmuel Navi, and from his court. Va'achia hashileni moitzim Mitzrayim haya v'Levi haya v'shama Moshe v'hayu katan b'yamei Moshe v'hu kibul miDavid ubeis dinai. Now, Achia hashileni is an interesting character in that he was alive in Mitzrayim. He was a child, a small child in the house of Levi, and he was a child and left. You see, he was with Moshe and with the Jewish people during Yetzias Mitzrayim, during the Exodus. Now, he lived an extraordinarily long time that he was able to actually see David HaMelech. So, Achia Shaleni went from Moshe, seeing Moshe, leaving Mitzrayim with Moshe, seeing all those miracles, on through seeing the Zakanim and the, you know, and Yeshua and Pinchas and all these people down to Eli and even to Shmuel and David HaMelech. And it says that he received. Sure.
So is the reason Achia Shlomi, the reason he didn't die in the desert, is it because he was underage?
Right, he wasn't part of those who were included in the Gezerah, in the decree. Right, good question.
And then one more while I have you.
Sure.
Eli, is it the same case for him that he just lived so long that he was able to transmit that to Shmuel Hanavi?
Right.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But Achia Shaleni was even before Eli. Eli wasn't from that time. So yeah, good question. So Achia Shaleni had seen all of those generations, and it's interesting that he says Kibo David, that he received it from David, because he was around from before David, but that's how the Rambam has it. Kibo David ubeis dinai, and he received it from David and his court. Eliyahu kibo me'achia Shaleni ubeis dinai, and then Eliyahu Navi received the Torah Shabbat Peh from Achia Shaleni and his court. Ve'Elisha, right? Ve'Elisha kibo me'Eliyahu ubeis dinai, and Elisha, I guess the Navi, the prophet that came after Eliyahu Navi, we know that that was his disciple, so he then received the Torah Shabbat Peh from Eliyahu Navi. Yeah, right, because Elisha came after. Yeah, okay. So the Yehoyada Hakayin Kiba me Elisha ubeis dinai. Yehoyada, the priest, received it from Elisha and his court. Was Zechariah Kiba me Yehoyada ubeis dinai, and Zechariah received it from Yehoyada. Hosea also was after this time, and Kibel Zechariah ubeis dinai, and he received it from Zechariah. But Amos Kibel me Hosea ubeis dinai, and Amos received it from Hosea. V'Yeshaya Kibel me Amos ubeis dinai, Yeshaya received it from Isaiah, right? Prophet Isaiah received it from Amos in his court. Umicha Kibel me Yeshaya ubeis dinai. Micha received it from Yeshaya, from Isaiah and his court. V'Yoel kibel Micha ubeis Dinai, and Yoel, Joel, received it from Micha. V'Nachum kibel miYoel ubeis Dinai, and Nachum received it from Yoel and his court. V'Chabakuk kibel Menachum ubeis Dinai, Chabakuk received it from Nachum and his court. Utzefania kibel Mechabakuk ubeis Dinai, and Tzefania received it from Chabakuk and his court. V'Yirmiyah, and here we go. V'Yirmiyah, or Yirmiyahu, Jeremiah, kibel Mitzfania ubeis Dinai, and he received it from Tzefania. Ubaruch ben Neriah kibel Yirmiyah ubeis Dinai, and Baruch ben Neriah received it from Yirmiyahu, from Jeremiah. Ve'Ezra ubeis Dinai kiblu meBaruch ben Neriah ubeis Dinai, and Ezra the scribe received it from Baruch ben Neriah and his court. Now Ezra was, so let's see, several of these were in Babylonian exile. As the Jewish people at this time were already after the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash. The Babylonian, the Babylonians conquered the land and took the Yidden into exile into Babylonia. And then you have some of these teaching the academies and teaching the next and the ones to follow in Babylonia, right? And Ezra, Ezra the scribe, he's famous. He comes back into Eretz Yisrael and he builds, and he rebuilds the Jewish people in the land of Israel. So based in Leishel, Ezra, Haim Hanikroim Anshe Knesses Hagadayla. The court of Ezra, we see a new name. The name of the court of Ezra is the Anshe Knesses Hagadayla, the men of the Great Assembly. I think it's also been called the men of the Holy Assembly, but literally Anshe Knesses Hagadayla, men of the Great Assembly. Behaim, and they included Chagai, Zechariah, Malachi, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, Nehemiah ben Chachaliah, Mordechai, Bilshan. Right, Mordechai is from the story of Purim. He was also a member of the Knesset, the Anshe Knesset Hagadayla. Uzurbavel, Baharbe Chachamim Miman, and this is not the whole list. It doesn't go through the whole list, but these are the heavy hitters, so to speak, the ones that are most known, and there are many others. And this is Tashlumei the Ezrim Zakenim. There were 120 elders of these elders. Yeah, Tashlumei the Ezrim Zakenim. Yeah. The Achrei Mehem Hu Shimon Atzadik. The last of the members of the Great Assembly is Shimon Atzadik. An incredible story, the Gemara of Shimon Atzadik meeting Alexander the Great, and this was really the ushering in. And Alexander the Great, this is kind of like a transition period out of Nevuah, out of all these things, and so you have sort of the ushering in a new era, and Shimon Atzadik was the last of the Anshe Knesset Hagadayla. So this is kind of where we see that. Sorry about the noise. Okay. Can you still hear me? Yeah. Okay, great. Okay.
Your microphone does a great job about canceling the other noise, so don't even worry about it. You sound great.
Fantastic. Hats off to Apple. Okay, so what was that? Okay. Achrei Hu Shimon Atzadik, Hu Haya Miklal Hamea ve'Esrim. He was the last of the. He's among the 120 that we refer to as the entirety of the Anshe Knesset Hagadayla. V'kibul Torah Sheba'al Peh Mekulam, and he received the Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral tradition, from all of them, from all the elders before him. And he was a Kohen Gadol, the high priest, after Ezra. Now, Antigonus ish Seichai ubeis dinoi kiblu mishimon atzadik ubeis dinoi. So Antigonus ish Seichai and his Beis Din, his court, received the Torah Sheba'al Peh from Ezra, who was the high priest before him. No, sorry, from Shimon HaTzadik. Then it says, and the Yosef ben Yoezer, ish Tzareda the Yosef ben Yochanan, ish Yerushalayim ubeis dinam, kiblu ma'antignus ubeis dinoi. Now Yosef ben Yoezer and Yosef ben Yochanan, ish Yerushalayim, the man of Jerusalem, and their courts, meaning these two separate institutions, essentially receive it from Antigonus Antigonus ish Saichai and his court. Yeshua ben Parachia Benitai Ha'arbeli, sorry. Ubeis dinam kiblu mi Yosef ben Yoezer ben Yosef ben Yochanan ubeis dinam. Yeshua ben Parachia, and he, let's see, Yeshua ben Parachia, might know him from Pirkei Avos, ethics of our fathers. Yeshua ben Parachia and Nitai Ha'arbeli, and their courts received it from Yosef ben Yoezer, Yosef ben Yochanan, and Yosef ben Yochanan, and their courts. Yehuda ben Tabai, Shimon ben Shetach, ubeis dinam kiblu mi Yeshua ben Parachia, v'nitai ha'arbeli, ubeis dinam, and Yehuda ben Tabai and Shimon ben Shetach, and their courts received it from Yeshua ben Parachia and Nitai ha'arbeli. Now, going through this, all of these steps is, we're tracing from Moshe to how we get to Torah Sheba'al Peh and the halachas as they're written down in the Gemara. That's where we're headed, right? So Shemaya v'Avtalya and Geirei Atzedek ubeis dinam kiblu mi Yehuda v'Shimon ubeis dinam. Shemaya v'Avtalya were two famous converts, and they were the leaders of their generation, and Rambam mentions that they were converts. That was the famous part of their story, that they were converts, and they received it from Yehuda, Shimon, and their courts. Now Hillel v'Shamai ubeis dinam kiblu mishmai v'Avtalya ubeis dinam. Hillel and Shammai, the famous Hillel and the famous Shammai, received their tradition, received the oral tradition, the oral Torah, the Torah Sheba'al Peh, from these two famous converts, Shammai, or Shemaya v'Avtalya, and Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Rabbi Shimon benoi shel Hillel Zaken, kiblu mehillel b'Shammai ubeis dinam. Yochanan ben Zakkai, Rabbi Shimon, who was the son of Hillel Zaken, the famous Hillel, they received the Torah, the oral Torah, from Hillel and Shammai in their courts. Now, Chamisha Talmidim Hayuloi, the Rabbanan Yochanan ben Zakkai, 5 of these students of Yochanan ben Zakkai, V'heim Gedolei HaChachamim Shekiblu Memenu. They were, let's see, Chamisha, okay. They were great sages themselves, and they received the oral Torah, the Torah Sheba'al Peh, from him. And they are Rabbi Eliezer Hagadol, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Yosef HaKohen, Rabbi Shimon ben Nesanel, Rabbi Elazar ben Arach, Rabbi Akiva ben Yosef Kiba Rabbi Eliezer Hagadol. Now, the Yosef Aviv Ger Tzedek Haya. So he goes to these 5 students, and when he gets to Rabbi Akiva, he mentions that his father was a convert. It's interesting that he points out these by Shmaya and Avtalya. It's not as that makes more sense. That is such a big part of their story. But it's interesting about Rabbi Akiva. But anyways, he mentions Rabbi Akiva that his father, Ger Tzedek, Rabbi Yishmael, Rabbi Meir ben Ger Tzedek, Kiblu min Rabbi Akiva, and then he mentions that Rabbi Meir, the famous Rabbi Meir, also Rabbi Meir Balanes, was also the son of a convert, and they received, right, Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Meir received the oral Torah, the Torah Shabbat Pet, from Rabbi Akiva. V'gam kivu Rabbi Meir v'chaveirav Rabbi Yishmael, and also Rabbi Meir and his contemporaries received the Torah from Rabbi Yishmael. Chaveirav shel Rabbi Meir heim, and the contemporaries of Rabbi Meir are Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Nechemiah, Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua, Rabbi Yochanan Hasandlar, Shimon ben Azai, Rabbi Hanania ben Tradnion, and V'chein Kiblu Chaveirav shel Rabbi Akiva me Rabbi Eliezer Agadol. And so too, the contemporaries of Rabbi Akiva also they received the V'chein Kiblu Chaveirav shel Rabbi Akiva me Rabbi Eliezer Agadol, and they received, the contemporaries of Rabbi Akiva received it from Rabbi Eliezer Agadol. V'chaveirav shel Rabbi Akiva heim, and the contemporaries of Rabbi Akiva are Rabbi Tarfon, Rabbi shel Rabbi Yosef HaGalili, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. And this is Rabbi Gamliel Hazaken, Kibul me Rabbi Shimon Aviv, B'nai shel Hillel Hazaken. So Rabbi Gamliel Hazaken, there's another Rabbi Gamliel, but Rabbi Gamliel Hazaken was the grandson of Hillel Hazaken, of the famous Hillel. Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Gamliel's father is Rabbi Shimon. So Rabbi Shimon, B'nai Kibul Memenu, received it from Hillel. Rabbi Gamliel, B'nai Kibul Memenu, and Rabbi Gamliel received it from him, from his father. Rabbi Shimon B'nai Kibul Memenu, and then his son Rabbi Shimon, named after his grandfather, received it from him, from Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Yehuda B'nai shel Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Yehuda got it from Rabbi Shimon, his father. Zeu Nikra Rabbeinu HaKadosh, and he was called Zeu Shenikra Rabbeinu HaKadosh, and this was Rabbeinu HaKadosh, who Kibul Me'avav U'mei Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua U'mei Rabbi Shimon Chaveirav. Yeah. So Rabbeinu HaKadosh from his father, and from Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua, Rabbi Shimon Chaveirav, Rabbi Shimon and all of his contemporaries, right? Okay. See, the time to go to switch now? Probably not. What time is it? Okay. So really quick before I run, I do want to just kind of say this last little bit. Is Rabbeinu HaKadosh Chibra Mishnah. Rabbeinu HaKadosh compiled the Mishnah. Moshe Rabbeinu va'ad Rabbeinu HaKadosh Loi Chibra Shem Lamdin Oisai V'Rabim B'Torah Sheba'al Peh Ela B'Chol Dor V'Dor Reish Bezdin Oy Navi Shahaya Ba'Isa Hador Kosev La'atzmai Zichrein Hashemues Sheshama Me'Rabbi Isav U'Melamed Al Peh B'Rabim. So Rabbeinu HaKadosh composed the Mishnah, put the Mishnah together, right? And from the time of Moshe Rabbeinu till Rabbeinu HaKadosh, the compiler of the Mishnah, no one had put together, written down the text of the Torah Shabbat Peh, right? That was what we were leading to. That the whole time it remained Torah Shabbat Peh, and it wasn't from the time, all of those steps that we went from Moshe Rabbeinu until Rabbeinu HaKadosh, the Torah Shabbat Peh was referred to as the Torah Shabbat Peh, and it remained Baal Peh. So once we reach Rabbeinu HaKadosh, then it gets compiled, it gets written down, yeah. So I'll probably we'll just kind of jump into the beginning of the Mishnah Torah. I'll kind of wrap up from here, from this point, into how we get to Rambam himself, and hopefully start with the Yesodei Torah, the beginning of the content of the Sefer Hamada, the Book of Knowledge, and yeah, appreciate you all for coming.
A quick question, Rabbi.
Sure.
You said Rabbeinu Hakadosh is Rabbi Yehuda Nasi? Is that who he is?
Yeah. Yehuda Nasi was the
Okay.
son of Shimon. Yeah. Yehuda Nasi is Rabbeinu HaKadosh.
And he wrote the Mishnah for the first time?
He compiled it, exactly.
Okay.
And from Moshe to Yehuda Nasi, it was never, That's good. Yeah,
He
I'm
was
gonna
very
stop.
wealthy, right?
Sorry?
Rabbeinu Danasi, he was very wealthy, so he was able to sponsor it. Correct?
He was wealthy. Yeah.
Very wealthy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Big time yichus. Good.
Yeah.
He had a good lineage. Yeah. Okay, so we all do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So great. Appreciate you all coming. And if we'll see you next week. And these are being recorded, so you can always go back, or if you miss, you can jump on and see them.
Yeah, I apologize. I was at the show. We're doing cottage for a couple of guys for the next 3 weeks. So I jumped on a little late.
No
But
need
I'll
to
revisit.
apologize. Appreciate
Yeah.
you jumping on. Absolutely.
This is the first class, by the way, so we're on
Yep.
time.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. Yeah.
That Nilu?
Yes, I'm back.
All right.
Yes, I'm back finally from California
good.
back to New York. I feel put together a little with all this time zone distortion. Threw me off.
Good to have you